So good afternoon, everyone. We would like to welcome you to the 98th webinar of the RAEX Sustainability Cycle. Today, our topic is ESG transparency and sustainability management ranking of Hungarian public companies. For those of you who are less familiar with the webinar cycle, we are live on air every Wednesday with different sustainability topics. Sometimes we have English webinars, sometimes we have Russian webinars. The majority of the cycle is in Russian, but we do have some English topics and we have annual conference in English. So you can check the recordings of previous events on our YouTube channel, and we also have a full list mentioning topics and speakers on our website. So today we will speak about ESG transparency and sustainability management of Hungarian public companies. We will discuss ESG and sustainability activities of our agency so that you get full impression. We also will discuss regulatory expectations related to non-financial reporting and ESG. ESG and transparency um, ranking of Hungarian companies and key takeaways of this ranking. Today, among the speakers will be me, Svetlana Grishankova, Managing Director of RAEX-Europe, and my colleagues from RAEX-Europe Rating Service, Mikhail Kaptsov and Pavel Mezian. Pavel, next page, please. So a bit about the agency. We started as an independent credit rating agency. We are located in Frankfurt am Main. We started in 2014 and we started with ESG in 2017 when we joined the UNPRI ESG in Credit Rating Initiative, and we understood that the world of ESG is much broader. We are members of LuxFlag Sustainable Association. We do sustainability webinars, and as mentioned, we have annual conference on responsible investment. Next slide, please. Among our ESG services, we have ESG ratings and rankings for companies and regions. So today we're discussing Hungarian ranking. We did previously 3 or 4 weeks ago Romanian ranking in quite similar format, so you can refer to the recording of that one. And we have a number of other locations. We also do consulting and research with helping with ESG strategies, conducting ESG related studies. And we do second party opinion for green bonds, social bonds, sustainability linked bonds, and of course loans of all those types. Next, please. We have a big project of a database for ESG corporate ratings. This database has already 174 companies from 20 different industries. With this database, we help to create benchmarks, do portfolio assessment, and we're adding new companies and on-demand companies. So if you have some companies which are not covered by other rating agencies or poorly covered, we're happy to help with that. Now I will hand over to my colleague Mikhail, who will be speaking about regulation of non-financial reporting in the EU and in Hungary in particular. Mikhail, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Svetlana. Before presenting you the results of our transparency ranking of Hungarian companies, we'll give you a brief overview of the most important parts of non-financial regulation and initiatives in the EU and a bit also in Hungary. Of course, there is a multitude of different and overlapping regulations. That is why we will concentrate on the most important ones. We'll start with the EU level, and the 3 key EU ESG disclosure regulations are the following: the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulations, and of course the EU taxonomy. We'll start with the first one. CSRD is a successor of another legislative act, the previous legislation or regulation that's called the NFRD, or Non-Financial Reporting Directive, 2014/95/EU. The one was adopted in 2014 and entered into force around 4 years ago. And the main purpose of it was to increase the supply of ESG data, and it really did so, but the information disclosed in accordance with this regulation is still insufficient, and it is often non-comparable for investors and other stakeholders, despite the guidelines that accompany the regulation. One of them was introduced in 2017, and one climate-related was introduced in 2019. That is why in April last year, the European Commission adopted a legislative proposal for the CSRD, and this one will amend the NFRD requirements. Namely, it will extend the scope of the reporting obligations and introduce more detailed reporting requirements and also mandatory third-party limited assurance. All the changes, the most important ones, are represented in the table. The logic for inclusion of companies in the scope will be a bit different now. The scope of information got larger. Data now is to be presented in a special format, XHTML, and limited third-party assurance will be mandatory. This piece of legislation will come into power at the end of this year, and application of the standard is expected in 2024. Going further, CSRD will apply it first for all large companies and then for all companies in general on the market. The next slide and the next one will be SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. It was introduced in 2019 and came into effect in March 2021. It imposes mandatory ESG disclosure obligations for financial market participants, like asset managers, pension funds, and banks and insurers. And main aim is to prevent greenwashing and increase transparency on the European capital markets. That is why both entity level and product level disclosures are mandatory according to this act. And format and content of the reported information is regulated by additional specifications. And these are given in the so-called RTS, Regulatory Technical Standards. So the next one would be EU taxonomy. And what is it? In essence, it is a classification system. And the aim of the taxonomy is to help define environmentally sustainable activities. It applies to the same companies under the scope of NFRD and to the financial market participants as well. And in order to be classified as environmentally sustainable, according to the taxonomy, at least one of the 6 key objectives is to be achieved, and at the same time, no harm should be done to any other topics. Moreover, the activity must also comply with key minimum standards like OECD guidelines and United Nations principles, for example. Contribution or harm are measured based on the special technical screening criteria, and the first 2 of these criteria were published in June 2021. And starting from this year, the companies report on taxonomy eligibility for such topics as climate change adaptation and mitigation. Regulation requires companies to disclose 3 KPIs: the percentage of turnover derived from green products and services, and the percentage of CapEx and OpEx related to green assets or processes. Starting from 2023, the companies in scope are expected to start reporting on the remaining objectives. And now we'll briefly cover the Hungarian reporting regulation and initiatives. Of course, the implementation of all the EU regulations is mandatory in Hungary. For example, NFRD was transposed into the Hungarian law via Hungarian Accounting Act in 2016. It applies only to large companies, as of now, the companies of public interest. According to this act, the non-financial statements shall include the description of business model of the company, description of all the policies applied by the company regarding environmental and social issues, anti-corruption measures, and basically major ESG topics. Of course, the results of the above mentioned policies should be also disclosed, as well as the risks that are material for the company and key non-financial data. And in case a company does not have one or more of these policies, or some data is missing or lacking, the act requires the company to explain this. Another important piece of legislation would be the Shareholder Rights Directive, SRD2, which was implemented in Hungary by the Act 67 of 2019. And according to this act, the ESG investment strategy is introduced and corporate engagement and disclosure obligations on the buy side. This one was mentioned in the Budapest Stock Exchange guide, ESG guide. And last but not least, of course, Central Bank of Hungary and other institutions are helping market participants with implementation guidelines and explanatory notes where it is relevant. As I already said, the stock exchange is also trying to help issuers with its guide and with numerous educational events and conferences. So that would be pretty much it for the intro on the legislation. And now we are moving on to the ranking itself, and Pavel will give you an introduction and present you the results of the ranking. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mikhail. So welcome everybody to the webinar from my side as well. And now we will actually move on to the ESG transparency and sustainability management ranking of Hungarian public companies. Basically, to our approach, how we have assessed the companies, what are the results, what are the findings, and so on. So first and foremost, our task was to basically select a shortlist of companies which would be later included into the ranking. And so we started with screening the 143 public companies listed on the Budapest Stock Exchange. And the results of this screening have showcased to us that out of those more than 140 companies, 52 companies have a sustainability or CSR or ESG, so either of those sections on their websites. We have also found out that only around 10% of the publicly listed companies publish sustainability reports or include a sustainability section in their annual or integrated reports. And we have also found out during our analysis, during our research, that less than 10% of companies are on the radars of ESG rating agencies. And in our opinion, all of those figures, which you can see on the slide, showcase that the ESG reporting and ESG transparency in Hungary is currently at an early stages of development. And in addition to that, if you pay your attention to the right-hand side of the screen, you will see that when it comes to ESG reporting more precisely, so out of all those 143 companies which we have assessed, 88% of companies don't have any ESG reports, and in addition to that, only 5% of companies assessed have more than 4 years of ESG reports available. So again, just to add to my previous point, that basically the ESG disclosure across Hungarian public companies is at early stages of development. So methodological framework here, I would like to talk a little bit more about how exactly we have assessed the companies and how we have arrived to the the score for each particular company. And then obviously we have compiled the scores into one table, and we have ranked the companies from the companies with the highest score to the companies with the lowest score. That will yield you the ranking, which you will see on one of the following slides. So important here, I think, thing to notice and to highlight that our assessment has not incorporated the analysis of performance of companies within the ESG area, and we have also not taken controversial situations in particular into account. So here we have focused purely on the availability and the quality of ESG information in the reporting of Hungarian public companies listed on the Budapest stock exchanges. We, for our ranking, have selected the largest companies based on the market cap, and we have included only companies with a market cap of more than 10 million euros. So our approach involved the assessment of disclosures of ESG indicators, as well as availability of ESG strategies, policies, and integration of sustainability issues into the corporate governance. And our evaluation criteria included 4 main blocks: environmental factors, social factors, corporate governance factors. So all of your plain vanilla ESG factors, basically, that you think about when you think about ESG rankings. And we have also incorporated within the corporate governance section there sustainable management practices aspect of our analysis. In addition to that, it's important here to highlight that we took into consideration not only the availability or absence of information, rather also the completeness and clarity of the data. The number of indicators used in the assessment of each separate company varies. Why is this the case? Well, this is the case because from obviously our experience, accumulated experience, and from the general understanding, knowledge, and things like that, we appreciate that for companies operating in different industries and different sectors, the material topics, material issues will be quite different. Quite significantly different sometimes. So the final scope of indicators which we have used for the assessment of each particular company was different depending on the industry to which the company belongs. Simple example, we have not assessed such topic as biodiversity for banks, for instance. However, we have assessed it for instance, oil and gas companies. In our assessment, we have focused on 2 types of indicators. They are binary indicators and discrete indicators. So a simple example of a binary indicator will be, for instance, the absence or presence of a certain policy, for instance, in the topic of energy efficiency or water use. So if the company which we have assessed has a policy, the company will get 1 point for this indicator. If there is no policy in place, there will be 0 points. There have also been discrete indicators which we have applied, for instance, for environmental figures such as water discharge, water use, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. So here, the company would have gotten a perfect score of 1 if the company would have 4 years of respective data available. So, for instance, 4 years of water withdrawal figures. Why 4 years? Well, this is basically the time horizon which, in our opinion, reflects, basically a good time horizon and gives you a good indication of the dynamic of the trend of companies, basically figures of companies' performance. And this is actually the time horizon which we will use in our full ESG rating assessment. Again, this is, the ranking of sustainability is of ESG transparency is a simplified, basically, version of ESG ranking. So yeah, I mean, there have also been some discrete indicators which we have assessed from 0 to 1 with the step of 0.25. The rating for each section, so environmental, social, and governance section, was calculated as the ratio of the received scores to the maximum number of scores that the company could get for a particular section. And then once we have gotten the score for the E, S, and G sections, the final rating is calculated as the average of E, S, and G ratings. Of course, there are some limitations to this analysis. First and foremost, basically what I have already mentioned here, we have not focused on the performance of the companies. We have not focused on the trend, the effectiveness, on the controversies. We have merely taken a look at the assessment of transparency of ESG data, and we have obviously also taken a look at the availability of sustainable management practices in the companies. And we cannot confirm the reliability of the disclosed information within the scope of our assessment. Moving on to some of the examples of indicators which we have used for our assessment. So like I have already mentioned, we have discrete and binary factors. And for instance, a simple example of a binary factor within their water use topic will be the water risks and measures programs to reduce water use. So in this case, if the company, for instance, have this policy in place or program in place, we will just put one for the assessment. However, when it comes to, for instance, the indicator by the name of water discharge, here the assessment will be discrete, so the company could get the score based on the number of years of the available data. In addition to water use, we have also assessed within the environmental section such topics as waste management and recycling, generation of contaminants, biodiversity, energy use, environmental product responsibility. We have also taken a look at such topics as climate change, supply chain, environmental compliance, and an example of a specific topic which we have used only for banks will be a topic of environmental asset portfolio. Moving on to the social section, here we have assessed, again, all of your plain vanilla social topics such as labor practices, diversity and inclusion, social benefits, local communities, talent attraction and retention, and occupational health and safety. Here an example of, for instance, for occupational health and safety, OHS policy and management system will be an example of a binary indicator. However, when it comes to OHS figures, it will be actually a discrete indicator. For the corporate governance section, again, here we deal with the typical corporate governance topics, which are board structure and transparency, risk management, business ethics, and ownership. And we have also taken a look within the corporate governance section at reporting practices and sustainability management. So talking about those particular two categories, reporting practices and sustainability management, here, all of the indicators which we have assessed have been binary, so just the presence or absence of the mentioned items, except for the ESG reporting. Here, we have taken a look at basically how many years of ESG reporting there is in place. And before moving forward, I would also like to notify that I hope my colleagues maybe will also comment on this. I have received the message that we have only like 10 minutes left for the meeting. Is it the same for you, Mikhail and Svetlana?
Yeah, the same.
Yeah, I think we have some technical problem with Zoom.
Yeah.
Normally, it should be not limited, but
Exactly.
for some technical reason, it's about to end soon. But maybe we can reconnect with the same link. I'm not
I think, yes.
100% sure with that.
Yeah, I hope we will be able to reconnect, but I think by default our solution will be okay. We will just basically, we will have to stop this session, but you will be able to connect within the same link, and we will try to start basically the same meeting so that you don't have to connect with a different link or something like this. Again, this is something very specific, to be honest, for Zoom, but again, Zoom has been experiencing some weird things lately, so nothing that we can do about it. So now actually moving on to the ranking itself. So this is basically the result of our assessment, which you can see currently on the screen. I think first and foremost, it's important here to notice that, of course, I mean, some of the companies, namely the companies at the top of the list, will have a better level of ESG disclosure. However, overall, as I have explained on the previous slides, we have done some pre-screening, and all of the companies which were included in the final version of the ranking, which you can see on your screen now, basically are winners, and they showcase some level of ESG transparency. Another thing here to notice is that the ranking is quite diverse in terms of the representatives of different industries. We do not have any skewness towards a particular industry. So yeah, we have basically companies from oil and gas, from telecom, we have banks, we have chemical companies, insurance companies, and so on. So basically, this is just a quite wide selection of industries represented in this ranking with no dominance of a particular industry or a particular sector. Of course, apart from just listing the companies from the highest to lowest scores, there have also been some findings which we would like to highlight here. So first and foremost, environmental and social disclosures are noticeably lower than the governance disclosures, and so the average scores for the environmental and social sections are 21 and 25% respectively on average, with 25 and 24 companies having scores below 50%. And yeah, like you can see here on the right-hand side, those are the average scores for each of the topics which we have assessed. Again, they are quite significantly lower in comparison with the governance scores, which you will see on the next slide. This is something that we have observed not only for the Hungarian market, but I think this is something that we typically see for all the other markets which we have assessed so far. We connect it, or we explain it by the fact that governance topics is something that the companies have been dealing with for decades, and the topics within the governance sort of area are somewhat more familiar for the companies. However, the environmental and social topics have gained the traction, have gained the importance rather recently. So this is why basically the reporting on the environmental and social aspects is somewhat lagging behind the reporting on the governance aspects. And also on the left-hand side on the screen and in the center, you can see the two graphs showcasing the correlation between ESG scores and the size of the companies. And we have typically observed from the analysis of other markets as well that there is sort of a positive correlation between the size of the company and the quality of the ESG reporting. So the bigger the company in terms of the revenue or the market capitalization, which is the indicator we have used here, the better the ESG transparency of those companies. And we have noticed the same, we have observed the same trend here for the Hungarian companies. Among other findings of our analysis, which we have noticed, so the disclosure of corporate governance, as it typically the case is for other markets, for other regions as well, is a strength of almost all companies, and it has not been an exception here in Hungary. So the average score for the companies assessed has been 51%, with 12 companies having the score above 50%. However, non-financial reporting practices are on the development stage in Hungary, and although 11 companies already publish sustainability reports, only 6 of those companies use GRI standards, and only 4 have external assurance. Sustainability management practices are also at an early stage of development, with the average score for this topic being 25% for the companies assessed. And we also highlight the fact that less than 30% of the assessed companies have commitments to sustainability development goals and clear ESG targets, while almost 50% of companies have a sustainability strategy. And as you can also see here again on the right-hand side of the screen, and also, in comparison with the previous slide, which was, the assessment of E and S indicators, we can see here that the level of disclosure, and so the final scores are significantly higher for the governance topics, which again, something that we have traditionally observed for other markets as well, due to the fact that, again, the governance topic, in our opinion, is something more traditional for the companies, and E&S topics is something more sort of, fresh, something new, something that has gained traction rather recently due to the whole, climate change agenda and things like that. To sum it up, basically, our recommendations on how the situation can be improved. So it obviously makes sense for companies to identify material topics and to consider the stakeholder feedback. in their activity, in their reporting, development of ESG strategies and policies covering key material topics is also something that the companies can implement in order to not only improve their scores in this particular ranking, but also to improve their generally ESG agenda, policies, and performance. Setting ESG goals and KPIs is another sort of thing is another action that companies can implement to develop their ESG strategies and agenda. Regular non-financial information collection is obviously an important step to the improvement of ESG transparency, which will eventually lead to the publication of non-financial reports based ideally on international standards. And with external assurance, which will, improve the comparability and of the information presented, and also, the external assurance will also obviously add the, the trust level for all the different groups of stakeholders. Allocation of a separate section, sustainability section on the company's website is another thing, in our opinion, which can be done basically to improve the availability or reachability, if you want, of ESG data for the different groups of stakeholders. And on this special website section, such information can be published as ESG strategies and policies, ESG reports also, including the current ESG reports, or the latest versions of ESG reports, as well as archives of annual and ESG data. And another thing, obviously, to increase basically the reach of ESG reporting and increase the availability of ESG reporting, not only for local stakeholders, but also for the international stakeholders. This, of course, applies to, to larger companies, to companies which have more interest and more pressure from international stakeholders and shareholders. Publication of relevant information in English will be another step that companies can take in order to facilitate access to this information by international stakeholders. So yes, this is basically something that we wanted to present to you today. And yes, Svetlana, back to you.
Thank you, Pavel. As usual, we are open to any questions. You can put them in chat, or if you want to ask a question, you can raise a hand and ask it verbally. We're also available for contact later if you want to ask more detailed questions or ask questions relevant to your particular company. We are continuing with webinar cycle, and next Wednesday we will be speaking about internal carbon pricing. The webinar time would be 1 o'clock Central European time or 2 p.m. Moscow time. This webinar would be in Russian. You can subscribe to our Telegram channel and see the latest news, in general news about sustainability, ESG field, and news on our future events. News about events in English are also always available on our website. So if you want to drop questions in chat, we're available. Or if not, we would like to thank you for the attention and being with us today. We also apologize for Zoom technical difficulties, but digital world is not always perfect. So thank you. Pavel, can you switch to the contact detail? Yeah, thank you. So you can reach us using these contact details if you have questions afterwards. We will send to everyone registered the link to the recording, and we will also send the slides from today. Thanks a lot and have a nice day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.